let me tell you a little bit about me. Susan, you already know me. Neil, you don't. And after this, maybe you won't want to. I don't know. But in any case, I'm a psychologist, both research and clinical psychologist. I teach at university, so I'm an academic. I see some patients, and I do some consulting for businesses, politicians, and nonprofits. And the theme of everything is unconscious processes. All right, so that's, can you see that page with the title? Is that working?
Yes, that's working.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I have it all up, and I'll talk it a bit. You know how to read, I presume. I'm gonna try and talk a little bit about the unconscious and how it works at a very kind of concrete, basic level. And I'm gonna try and get you guys to do something with me to demonstrate that it, in fact, works the way I say it does. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some research and some theorizing that I've done. And I have a book for those of you interested, well, both of you, on unconscious processes. I have brilliantly entitled it The Unconscious. It took me years to come up with that name. Anyway, the science behind the unconscious, I'm sure all familiar with the Freud view of the unconscious, which I'm against, but last 30 years or so, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, cognitive science, neuroscience, and psychology science are the brain and mind work that have great relevance to understanding unconscious processes. And they agree on three things, and here are the three things. One, that actually most of our processing is unconscious. Consciousness matters, but it's secondary. Two, and this is important, we think we are organized associatively. We're not organized logically, hierarchically, or anything like that. I'll explain what that means in a couple of minutes. And that the way our brain works and the way our mind works is we operate in parallel. And I'll explain what that means in a couple of minutes also, rather than in series. So you see the usual metaphor of the iceberg. All right, so I said earlier that we don't think linearly or rationally. And here's what I mean. The old metaphor of the mind was based on a computer, and it's wrong. We're not computers. What computers do is they do one thing at a time. That's called serial processing, but they do it really fast. They do it in nanoseconds. We operate very slowly in hundredths of a second, actually. And the reason we're able to do anything at all is we do a million things at once, and we operate in terms of associations. And this has to be unconscious. By definition, or it wouldn't work. So here's the parallel processing. Again, computers do one thing at a time, do it really fast. We have to do a million things at once. Like you're aware of a singular kind of mental state that you're in, but it actually is composed of hundreds, if not thousands, of separate mental states that feel integrated to you, but we know that they're not. And that's how the mind and the brain works. It does a million things at once. And that's how it's able to compete with a computer. And by the way, that means that things have to be unconscious because you can't possibly be aware of all the thousands of things going on at the same time. So I'm going to focus on the associative way that the mind works today and explain what I mean. Can you see this picture, the networks of neurons? Okay. So if you know anything about the brain, and you know that it's composed of neurons, and the neurons are all connected to one another. And some neurons are connected to a few, and some neurons are connected to a couple of thousand, and some neurons are connected to 10,000. So the neurons are associatively connected. That's just how your brain is organized. Well, if your brain is organized that way, your mind has to be organized the same way, because your mind is just a reflection, a parallel process to your brain. And so this shows you how old I am, that I use 7-Up, because I should have used Sprite. But in any case, the idea is that the way we think associatively is we have a concept or an idea or a feeling or a thought, and it is connected. So if I say the word night to you, since there's only 2 of you, I can ask you to shout out, what word comes to mind when I say night?
Sleep.
Sleep. Okay, Susan?
Day. Okay.
Now, if I ask you, we'll start with you, Neil, why did you say sleep? Exactly.
That's a good question. When you said night, I thought of darkness, and when I thought of darkness, I thought of, the ideal condition for sleeping.
Right. But I doubt that went
So I
through your
thought-
head, the logical series of events. We said, well, let's see, night, and night has darkness to it, and has sleep in it, and then therefore darkness. It just popped into your head is what happened.
Yes.
That's what I mean by associations. And if I kept going, you could have a whole web of associations. Susan, I imagine the same.
Yeah, it's just,
And you explain it, you say, well, day is the opposite of night, but your mind didn't say to you, let us now play the game of opposites. So what I did was I accessed an associative network in your head, and were I to keep going, I would get the entire network related to tonight on both of you, which is, by the way, what clinic, I don't have to tell this to you, Susan. Neil, are you a psychologist by any chance? Neil, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Are you a psychologist? What do you do?
No, I'm afraid I'm just an astrophysicist.
Oh, so you're a real scientist. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do real stuff. But
I do a wide range of stuff. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but please go on.
okay. So what I was going to say is clinicians take advantage of this because when patients start talking, it may seem like they're not talking about what they should be talking about or answering the question you asked them, but what they're actually giving you are associations to exactly that. And clinicians take advantage of that and know how to use that. So that's part of associative networks. All right, I'm going to try something, and there's only two of you. I want you to pick one of these numbers. Don't think about it. Just shout it out to me.
2.
3.
Okay. So the usual answer is 3. The second most common answer is 2. Almost no one ever says 1 or 4. Were there 50 people in the audience or more, I would have gotten about 35 3s, 10 2s, and the rest, the other 5 scattered between 1 and 4. But the question is why? And here's the why, and here's what we're not aware of. We like things to the right. Nobody is someone's left-hand man. They're your right-hand man. But we don't like things to the extreme right, with some few exceptions in politics, I suppose. So that's one thing. And any of you remember the Pepsi challenge?
Yeah.
Well, if you go, the Pepsi challenge was, you're revealing that you're younger than me, Neil. The Pepsi challenge was they put Pepsi and Coke together, not tell people which one was which.
What is this? And you're supposed to do blind taste tests.
Right. Now go to the YouTube and go look at the blind taste test. Pepsi is always on the right. Now, I don't know if they did that on purpose.
They
I don't know.
probably did. They probably did. It's marketing. Marketing knows psychology more than we do.
Okay, so the answer is that they didn't prefer Pepsi, they preferred the right, is what they actually preferred.
Can I ask
So, go ahead.
a quick question? I'm left-handed. Did that have any bearing on my choosing 2?
I'm left-handed also, and I chose 3.
Okay.
The only thing being left-handed has a bearing on is the sense of being oppressed, I think, which and getting smudges on your hand when you try and write. I'll tell you, just as an offshoot, since there's just a couple of us, this is how data can be misinterpreted, what I'm about to tell you. Years ago, in the 1980s, someone did a study on left-handed people, on lefties, and concluded that lefties don't live as long as righties, and that therefore it's dangerous to be left-handed. Since I'm left-handed, this did not make me happy. The flaw in the data analysis was the following. The way he did it was he said, what percentage of the population is left-handed at age 20? I'm going to make up numbers. It's 15. All right. What percentage of the population is left-handed at the age of 50? 12. And what about 80? 8. Aha, they're all dead.
No.
So they must have died earlier. The actual answer is, anyone want to guess?
Well, you could change and you can become ambidextrous and you cannot identify yourself as such.
Yeah, that's about half of the answer. The actual answer is it was a generational effect. Back in the day, it was a bad thing to be a lefty. Left is the side of the devil. Left is sinister in Latin. Left is gauche in French, and so on and so forth. So parents converted their children. So the reason
that was a cross-sectional study in a moment in time, not longitudinal, you mean?
that's correct.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That's So is yes, there was a lower percentage of left-handed 80-year-olds, not because they were dead, but because they had been converted. So you have to watch out. So Neil, you and I have the chance to live a long life now.
Amen.
Now amen. Right. So let's be religious. So the answer to why you pick 2 or 3, but particularly 3, is we have a lot of associations to 3, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. You get 3 wishes, 3 strikes and you're out, the Holy Trinity. There's a million of them. So right away, our associative network goes to 3. And the reason that 3 is a magic number that way is our brain is actually wired for the number 3. What I mean by that is if you look perceptually at a scene, or if you put coins in your hand, usually I do this when I do it live, I show a bunch of coins. If I put 3 or 4 coins in my hand and I ask you how many they are, you can just see it, 3, maybe 4. But if I put 5 or 6 coins in my hand, you have to start counting, because perceptually we can take in 3 things at a time and that's it. And anything more than that, we have to start using our frontal lobes to figure out. And so therefore 3 became a magic number because it is in fact a brain number. And of course, none of us are aware of that because it's just how we're built. So I'm going to try something else, again with an N of 2. And I'm going to have on the next slide an imaginary jar. And the jar has 100 personality descriptions of people. And 90 of those people are engineers, 10 of them are artists. 90 engineers, 10 artists. Okay, here's my jar. You all see it. I'm reaching into it. I'm pulling out a piece of paper and I'm going to read it. Emotionally sensitive and creative. That's what I read. What do you think? Is this an artist?
Well, I would have honestly said engineer because
Why?
Because it was the creative part that got me thinking about it. Doing engineering is a very creative, can
Yes,
be.
I agree with that, but you know the stereotype.
Right. Most people would say, I think most people would say artist.
Most people do say artist, but Neil, you still reacted in terms of associations. The real reason to react engineer is the following. 90 out of 100, I gave you the odds. No matter what I pull out of that jar, you should say engineer. It doesn't matter what I pull out, unless I pull out.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you do, Neil, please.
I was just going to say that I went through that thinking process prior to your asking the question when you said that there are, 90 of these and 10 of those. That definitely weighted my answer.
And you are a mathematical person, I presume.
Yes.
So your associative networks have to do with math. Most of the rest of us ordinary human beings who are not rocket scientists don't have math as part of our associative networks. And even you ended up explaining to me that you got it from creative and not from the numbers. The real correct way to have done it is, I don't really care what you pull out of the hat or out of the jar. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that I got 90-10. So unless I pull out of the jar something that says, I am an engineer and not an artist, or vice versa, you have to guess engineer. You have to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's so, sorry, go ahead.
No, please, Susan.
So interesting because, you know what, I'm thinking of a video, it's an old video of Alan Alda doing I'm sure you've seen it, the split brain colossum, I'm saying it wrong, colossum, the split
Corpus callosum. Yeah.
Thank you. The corpus word was not coming. And what I'm reminded of, it's fascinating because there's a part of our brain, like Neil, you were just explaining like why you chose that, even though you really chose it because of math. But like we make up these stories to tell ourselves, like almost like, to justify why our unconscious brain is making those decisions. And it's really fascinating. That was great, to see that. Yeah.
Well, since we're going off on that, the guy that came up with the split brain, by the way, split brain is kind of outdated, except as a metaphor nowadays, but I won't get into that. The guy that came up with it, a guy named Michael Gazzaniga,
Yes.
posits that we have a module in our brain that he calls the interpreter that actually sees what we do, so to speak, gets the information inside the head of what we do, and then offers a rationale for it. That actually consciousness doesn't really exist very much. It's epiphenomenal. And what we have is basically a rationalization module in our heads. So that's why we can make stuff up for reasons and actually believe them. Anyway, so that's the answer. So why didn't you use the math? And even you, Neil, even though you were aware of the math, the answer you gave me was an associative answer, is because that's what we do. We rely on associations, we use them automatically, and we're not aware of doing it. And I'm going to go through this part quickly, because this is what an engineer is supposed to look like. This is Wolowitz from the Big Bang. I'm curious, Neil, as an actual scientist, does the Big Bang offend you, entertain you, somewhere in the middle?
It was entertaining, or is entertaining. I've only watched, maybe a dozen episodes over the years, but they take the scientists and they play with the concepts and the themes, and it's okay. I'm fine with it.
Okay, but they do the stereotype. They can't date the women. They're socially awkward. On and on we go. So here's what an engineer is supposed to look like. Here's what an artist is supposed to look like. That's, of course, Salvador Dali. He should be stroking a cat also. But here's what an engineer can really look like. This is one of the top engineers in the country, a bioengineer, in fact, teaching at Yale. And here's what an artist can really look like. This is Buddy Holly, a rock star to rock stars. So the stereotype isn't true. Nonetheless, associatively in our head, it is true. And so what happened is, logically, we should have gone with the odds. There's not one of us that would say an engineer can't be emotional and can't be creative. And there's not one of us that would say an artist can't be nerdy and logical. So why do most people get it wrong, or why don't most people not go with the math? Because we go with the associations. When we combine them that way about people or professions, we call them stereotypes. So no one says, I'll ignore the math and pick one. We just do it. So that's harmless. Artists, engineers, who really cares? I'm not going to discriminate against either one in all probability. I'm not going to deny one or the other an opportunity. However, it's not harmless, because if I were to transform from artists and engineers to African Americans, Jews, gay people, Latinos, women, we have the same kinds of stereotypes, the same kinds of automatic associations. And then what we have is an unconscious bias. And what I'm going to show you now, and Susan, you saw this already, so I'm not going to show the video, but Neil, if you want to see it, send an email to Debbie and I'll send you the link to the particular Dumbo video that I'm going to show in a minute. How do we develop these stereotypes? And the answer is we're bombarded with them from the times we're little kids. And even children's movies, or especially children's movies, have them. So does anyone remember Dumbo? You guys remember the plot of Dumbo? Or the message, the lesson of Dumbo? I'm happy to tell you, and you'll remember if I do. All right, so here's the message. Dumbo, if you remember, is born with these giant ears. And people make fun of him. He's different. He's funny looking. He's ostracized. But it turns out that those ears are an asset. They enable him to fly. He can save the circus. And the lesson is that differences are valuable and we shouldn't discriminate based on differences. It's a wonderful and beautiful message.
Like Rudolph, right? Like Rudolph, the red-nosed
Like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and so on.
There's someone waiting to get in. Just
Okay.
let me let them in.
Sure. Does everyone still see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, welcome, by the way, and I'll recap just very briefly. I won't go through everything that I said. What I'm now trying to demonstrate is that our associative networks have led to our biases and prejudices, and that they develop very early in life. And I said that Dumbo's overt message is we should value differences. They turn out to be assets. Now here's I'm not going to play the video, but there's a scene in Dumbo that you can look up called the roustabouts. Does anyone remember seeing the movie Dumbo? Any of you can recall the original Dumbo?
I think so, but I don't remember the details.
Okay, no one remembers this scene, including African Americans, and I'll explain why I'm saying that particularly. In this scene, they're putting the circus up, the workmen, and it's late at night, it's completely dark, and all the people putting up the circus are black and have no faces. I don't mean that their faces are vague, I mean they are faceless.
You know, even though I saw it, if you want to show it again for everybody on the video, you can do that. I don't have.
Well, when I tried to show it last time, I screwed up my technology, so I'm just going to describe it and send anyone the link who wants to see it. So these faceless black men are putting up the circus, and they're singing that they can't read and they can't write, and all they want to do is have comfortable shoes and lie in bed, and they don't care about money. And in the end, they scream that their boss calls them a hairy ape. And then we go back to the happy Dumbo scene. So consciously, differences are valuable. Unconsciously, we're promoting bias. The other thing I want you to notice, and that you can see, take a look at Dumbo's eyes. What color are they?
Blue.
Yeah. Do you know how many elephants have blue eyes? I'll give you a clue, none. And yet, why does Dumbo have blue eyes? Because blue eyes are good. We'll like Dumbo if he has blue eyes. So, okay, they remade Dumbo just, I think last year, 2018 or 2019. And they took out that scene of the roustabouts, of course. It's totally racist scene. But here's Dumbo. What color are his eyes?
Blue.
Isn't that something? No doubt a coincidence. By the way, none of the other elephants have blue eyes. Only Dumbo as the elephant has blue eyes, and there are no elephants with blue eyes. I checked it out. So what you have is this network of associations being built that white is good and blue eyes are good. So let's look at another movie that children watched. My kids love this movie. I like this movie, Happy Feet. And I picked Happy Feet because it's exactly the same message as Dumbo. Any of you see Happy Feet? You know the movie?
No.
Okay. So in Happy Feet, it's about penguins. And one of the penguins can all sing magnificently in this movie. But Mumbles, the name of the penguin, get it, Dumbo, now we've got Mumbles. Mumbles can't sing at all, but boy, can he dance. And the other penguins do not value dancing. He becomes ostracized, same plot as Dumbo. And his dancing ends up saving the penguins in the end. We should value differences. Let me show you the poster that advertises it. Notice anything?
Blue eyes.
What else?
Wider face.
He has a white face and blue eyes and none of the other penguins. This is an actual poster that they put out, and they're all like this. I'll show you a second one. Now, this is going to convince us to go see the movie because the hero has blue eyes and a white face, and his supporting cast have dark eyes and a black face. So just in case you think I cherry-picked it, here is another poster.
When was this?
2006, and it was Pixar, I believe.
Wow.
So now he has blue eyes again. He still has a white face. Notice all of the other penguins have black faces, every single one. Surprising, shocking, right? And yet there it is. I doubt, as I said, Susan, you heard me say this, that these people got in a room, rubbed their hands together like a stereotype villain and said, let us foment racism. I think they just said, what would be cute? I think it would be cuter. Yeah, let's look at the picture. This is cute. Let's go with it.
But it's also marketing, right? Like the marketing guy pointed out, it's marketing. What would sell better? And
yeah, but I agree.
And what sells better, unfortunately, is sometimes reinforcing racism. And that's
well, it sells better because it already sold. There's a saying in psychology that I think is wonderful by a guy named Robert Zients. He's passed away. And the saying is, familiarity breeds content.
Oh, yeah.
We like familiar things. So yes, the marketing guy, but the marketing guy didn't say, I like racism. The marketing guy said, they'll like this character better. Same thing, by the way, with Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. Yeah. She purposely called herself J.K. so they wouldn't know she was a woman right away. And she purposely made the hero a boy instead of a girl because more people would relate.
Right.
So that there's your sexism. I could show you the same thing in The Lion King, but here's a cereal box, 2017 for Kellogg's Corn Pops. On my left, and I presume your left, is the entire box. What you can see if you look closely is all the characters portrayed are of light color, and they're all having fun and diving and sliding and bathing in milk, except for one. And that's the one on the right that I blew up. And the one on the right that I blew up is the janitor, and he has darker skin. This is on a cereal box. You can't make this stuff up. And I'm not here trying to expose racism so much as to tell you how these associative networks develop. Okay. So now we're going to look at some studies that I did. And the first study I want to talk about, I'm only going to look at the USA results, is we looked at values. Now, mostly when you ask people what their values are, or when you investigate values in psychology, you ask them, what's important to you? You know, caring for other people, you know, making the world a better place. Everybody's a wonderful human being. But we decided to also look at unconscious values. I can explain the methodology to you if you're interested. But for now, I'm just going to show you what happened. The design I won't bore you with. I'm just putting it up. Sample size, what we collected. We collected these data in Brazil, China, and the USA in their native languages. And, oh, I am going to explain the test. Here's the test in a nutshell. If I ask you to do a task and I'm trying to distract you, you're going to be more easily distracted if what I'm distracting you with is relevant to you. Let me give you an everyday example. It's called the cocktail party phenomenon. So you're at a cocktail party or a restaurant, wherever you happen to be, and you're with a couple of friends, and you're having a conversation, and you're into it, you're enjoying it, and near you is another group of people having a conversation. You're not aware of anything they're saying because you're not paying attention. And then one of them mentions your name, says Avi or Neil or Susan, whatever they happen to say. And what happens? Your head swivels immediately, and you lose the conversation you were in, and you turn to listen to their conversation. Now, how did that happen? You weren't listening to them, except that you were. Your mind was processing that other conversation on a parallel channel. Some mechanisms in your head were telling you, don't worry about it. And then when something relevant to you happened, that mechanism in your head said, stop what you're doing, this is relevant, pay attention. So you did. So what we did was find a way to leverage that. And let's see if I have it here. Yeah. So we say to someone, I want you to tell me that a color the word is printed in. Ignore the content. So look at the top one. What color is that printed in?
Red.
It's not a trick question. Red. Now, what color is the bottom word printed in?
Blue.
Yeah, but did you feel it? The desire to say red, the split second of before you were able to say blue? Well, it turns out that works with anything that's on your mind. It doesn't have to be colors. It could be activated by a brand, a cartoon, an ad, a politician, anything. Okay. Here's what it looks like when we do the test. You now click on the correct color, which in this case is red. If the word intelligent is relevant to you, it'll take you just a little bit longer because you can't help but process that word. I hope I'm being clear. Okay. So let's look at the values. Here are the top values that people say they have in the United States. This is now relevant for what we're going through. Helpfulness, we want to help others. Choosing your own path, we're an individualistic society. We believe in finding our own way of doing things. And number 3, to find meaning in life. That's great. Now take a look at what the unconscious values are. Maintaining security, sex, and being traditional. They're not matching. So when I did this study, I did this for an advertising agency, and they, Y&R, and they asked me, well, what's going on here? And I said, well, what do you do in your spare in your time? How do you spend your time? Do you spend your time working in soup kitchens and thinking about the meaning of life? Or do you spend your time trying to make money, fooling around, and trying to maintain your cultural traditions? And the answer is number two.
Can I ask a question?
Please do. Who's asking now?
Avi.
Avi, okay.
Yeah, so can you go back to the previous slide? From what I know, and this is something that is very common in marketing, because we are creatures of evolution, all of us has what is called the lizard brain. The lizard brain is something evolutional, and the unconscious values are part of the lizard brain because we are all looking for, the lizard brain is always looking for safety, reproduction, and basically food. So the conscious values are more, I think, are more of the education and
So let me address that. That this metaphor of the reptile brain is a nice metaphor, but it's not like reptiles look for maintaining security and honoring tradition. What you're saying that's accurate is that we have a bunch of systems in our head. And I prefer not to use the term reptile brain, but if that makes it easier to conceptualize, that's fine with me as an associative network. In fact, it's not a reptile brain. It's different aspects of your mind doing different things. And this is a human brain. So unconsciously, what we're motivated to do, and what we in fact do, not just motivated to do, is to maintain security, to reproduce, and to keep things going. We are taught that we ought to do these other things. And by the way, the conscious values can override unconscious values if we're focused on them and if we're thinking about them, but that's what's required. The second you're distracted or behaving spontaneously, the unconscious values kick in. And there's research on what are called ironic processes that show that, but I won't get into that either. So the metaphor in advertising of the reptile brain I know of, but in fact, this is a human brain, and it's not, the metaphor suggests that beneath this more sophisticated brain that we humans have is a more primitive brain that we have in common with lower animals. That's not the case. What is the case is that we have a bunch of different things going on in our head at the same time, what I called parallel processing earlier, and that most of the time we're on automatic. And if we're on automatic, and take a look at the coronavirus, just take a look at what we're doing. And you can see this, even though we're told not to do these things. So I don't know if I've answered your question or addressed it, Avi, but you're right in terms of the metaphor. I just, I'm an academic and can't help myself.
Okay. Because, I come from the startup industry, and it's always when you're looking for a solution or for a need, if you find a need which is more addressed to the unconscious values, your ability to succeed is increased.
Well, yeah, you weren't here for the beginning, but I basically said something like that. The unconscious rules the roost. The conscious can override it only temporarily. If you want to really get into people, I'll give you a very quick example. The very famous speech by Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech, you all know it. And it was very inspiring. If he said I had a great idea, no one would care. It's the metaphor, it's getting to the unconscious that matters. You know this in advertising. So for example, the greatest, arguably the greatest tagline or motto of all is just do it. What the hell does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. But it associates to action, it associates to independence, and so now you can sell sneakers out of it. And I can go on and on in terms of this. As I said earlier, I do consult to marketing research firms and brands and so on, and we can measure this kind of thing. And yes, I agree with you, Avi. It's the unconscious that predicts what people will do, and then everyone thinks that's the conscious. So be it. So can I move on, or should we talk more at this level?
Thank you, thank you.
All right. So here's just a list. Helpfulness, which was number one, consciously. was number 16 unconsciously. And by the way, there were only 16. So it was totally at the bottom unconsciously. It's not what we automatically do. And just take a look, meaning in life, the only thing that was close was maintaining security. We do have a conscious value of maintaining security. And take a look at world peace, and maybe we'll understand why we don't have world peace. It's number 5 consciously, but second from the bottom unconsciously. And on we go. So here's what the advertising people, what Y&R said this told them. Sex sells, but it probably won't copy test well. But it told me something different because I'm more of a psychologist than a marketer, I guess. It told me that consciously we have progressive values and unconsciously we have conservative values. And so emotional pitches get conservatives going and rational pitches get progressives going, which means that conservatives have an advantage. I'm not taking a position about who's better or worse. I'm just saying how it works. Okay. So let's apply all of this to politics. The big dog is the name given to Bill Clinton back in 2012 when Barack Obama was running for a second term. And this is him at the Democratic convention where he wowed everybody. But before he wowed everybody, he was impeached. And we were told that people didn't like him. So here's the background for the study I'm going to show you. Al Gore decided that he didn't want Bill Clinton campaigning for him because his polls told him, and this is relevant to what you said, Avi, his polls told him that people didn't like Bill Clinton. And my colleague, Drew Weston, and I said, he's crazy. And we tried to contact the Gore campaign, but they knew better than us. And Gore didn't even win Arkansas, which was Clinton's home state. And depending on your point of view, Gore lost the election or he got robbed of the election, but it shouldn't have been that close in our opinion. We didn't have the technology back then to test this experimentally. But a few years later, there was a governor of California named Gray Davis. I don't know if any of you remember him. And he was faced with a recall election. Recall meaning someone didn't like him, got enough petitions, and they were going to vote to take him out of office. And Bill Clinton volunteered to campaign for him, and he made the same dumbass decision to ignore Bill Clinton. So we did a study. And a week before the election in California, online, we did the following study. We showed a picture of Bill Clinton, but we flashed it too quickly for people to know it was there. And then we showed a picture of Governor Davis very clearly, and asked him to rate Governor Davis. In a control condition, there was no Clinton, just Davis. Okay. And then we focused on the negatives because it was a recall election. And what we expected was the following. This isn't magic. We're just getting at people's associative networks. And if you're a Republican, you don't like Gray Davis, who's a Democrat, and you don't like Bill Clinton either, by the way. If you are a Democrat, you probably are lukewarm towards Gray Davis, and you like Bill Clinton, so nothing much is going to change. But if you're an independent, you're on the fence. And if you're going to like Bill Clinton, that'll move the needle in the direction of Gray Davis. So here we go. On the left, we have just Gray Davis, no Bill Clinton. And you see the Republicans in red, they don't like Gray Davis. You see the Democrats in blue, they're kind of neutral. By the way, the higher the number, the more negative. That's why I said we're doing negatives. So Davis, Republicans don't like him. The Democrats are lukewarm. And the independents really don't like him. Now take a look at the group that saw Bill Clinton without realizing it. The Republicans still don't like Gray Davis. Maybe they dislike him even more because they already don't like Clinton. We combined them. The Democratic needle moved slightly in the direction of Gray Davis, but look at the independents. They did a 180. Whereas just looking at Gray Davis, they hated him. Now with Clinton being associated with Gray Davis, they had no negativity towards him at all. Very radical. So our conclusion, Gore could have won. And Obama figured that out 12 years later. Bill Clinton was stumping for Obama everywhere. Everyone acknowledged that he was a huge asset. So Drew and I thought, good, the lesson was learned. It wasn't learned. 8 years later, Hillary Clinton ran for president. You may remember this. It was 4 years ago. And she, too, did not use Bill Clinton very much. So the lesson to me is unconsciousness is very hard for people to accept. I don't know what her motivations were for not using the most talented clinician of our lifetime, politician of our lifetime, but she didn't, and we know how that election turned out. And speaking of Hillary Clinton, we did a study 4 years ago when she ran against Donald Trump, and we're going to do the same study in a couple of weeks. So this is kind of contemporary. We did this on CNN. And again, I won't show you the video, but send me an email and I'll send you the link, because we did this live. We did this 6 months before the election, so we couldn't have faked it. And we were able to predict that Donald Trump could beat Hillary Clinton at a time when all the polls, which are based on conscious data, demonstrated that Trump didn't have a chance. And as we know, Trump had more than a chance. Turn on your TV, he's there now, I'm sure. So we looked at these associations on that test I showed you. We had some negatives, we had some positives. The negatives were scary, poor judgment, not qualified, mean, and bigot. The positives were shares my values, presidential, likable, competent leader, gets things done, inspiring, keeps us safe, cares about people like me, and genuine. All right, this is the methodology. I won't bore you with it, but I'll leave it up for a second in case some of you are methodological junkies. Okay, the negatives are in red, the positives are in green. Red light, green light. Here we go. These are the results for Trump. The very top associate, and by far, I don't know if you can see the numbers, but 20 milliseconds higher, and 10 milliseconds is a difference, is leader. So first and foremost, Trump is a leader. Now, I don't know if you like or dislike Trump, or there's a mix in this crowd of 3 people, but even if you hate Trump, you can't deny that he's a leader, because turn on your TV, he's all you see. He says anything, he tweets anything, it runs the news. Number 2 was bigot. Well, people have called him a bigot. Then he's got a bunch of greens. So he has a pretty positive kind of a profile here. All the way at the bottom is likable. Not really a likable person. So you think, oh, he's got a big disadvantage. Now look at, well, I won't read you this is the conclusion we came to. And in the conclusion, we said, and you can see it on CNN, this man can win. All right? Here's Hillary Clinton. Notice her number 1 association, scary. Notice her number 4, poor judgment. We think that was based on the email fiasco and how she handled it. She also did a thing in West Virginia where she announced to West Virginians that she was going to close coal mines. It's kind of like being in a synagogue and or a church and announcing that you're going to ban religion. So that really was poor judgment. In any case, the other key is, if you look at the bottom, she too is not likable. So it's a perfect storm. Her and Trump's unlikability canceled each other out. And here are our essay that holds it all together, that says it. I think the last 2 sentences are really the relevant ones. There's the anti-Hillary Clinton votes have passion, but there's very little positive passion for her. And her support is not deep and strong, which is exactly what happened. And remember, this is 6 months before the election. Okay, I'm basically done. What I hope that I showed is that we're not computers, that most of what we do is unconscious, that we're associatively organized and we operate in parallel, and that the unconscious is in charge of pretty much everything except for very small sections of our lives and short periods of time. And I'm done. So if you have any questions or you want Debbie or me to send you those links, we're happy to do that.